Greetings, I'm David Gonçalves from the University of Lisbon, and I'll present the paper Exploring Asymmetric Rules in Mixed Ability Gaming, which I co-authored with my advisors, André, Rodrigues and Tiago, Guerreiro, and my colleagues from the University of Bath, Mike Richardson, Alexandra Sousa and Michael Proulx. Digital games are still designed with a typical player without disabilities in mind. For example, most games imply some sort of visual interaction. While you see accessibility options in some titles, such as resizable interfaces and high contrast levels, for people who have severe visual impairments, these are not enough to be able to play independently. As such, blind players and players with severe low vision are generally barred from playing what most people play, and worse than that, from experiencing games with other people. And talking about multiplayer games, we can say that in this context, it's a real challenge to achieve inclusion. For instance, imagine we are designing a multiplayer game to include mixed visual abilities. We may keep visual and auditory feedback within the game, admittedly supplying richer output to sighted players and possibly inducing unfair competition or vain cooperation. On the other hand, if we remove the visual feedback, the game would be widely less appealing to sighted players, which could discourage them to keep playing. This can have serious consequences. Importantly, the segregation of communities that, although revolving around a common interest, in this case gaming, are actually bounded around people's abilities. In this work, we aim to overcome such limitations to open doors and foster mixed ability gaming by leveraging strong asymmetric gameplay. And what do I mean by this? In many multiplayer games, probably the majority, the gameplay is the same for all players. For example, in a typical racing game, all players drive a kart and have the goal of getting to the finish first. But you may know Mario Kart Double Dash, where in co-op mode, one player is a driver and the other uses items to delay other karts. The players interact very differently with the game and have different tasks. In this one, both roles are based on visual challenges and, as such, are inaccessible. We wanted to investigate how such an asymmetry could be leveraged if we mapped each role to ability-based challenges, in our case, visual and auditory challenges. We designed and developed two games following this approach. In the first game, players control a submarine. One is the pilot and has to drive the vehicle based on visual interaction. The other player is the engineer and has to use the sonar to find treasures, detect monsters, and manage equipment, only through sound. In the second game, the mapping to abilities is reversed. In this one, it's the pilot who has an auditory challenge and has to drive an aircraft without visual information. On the other hand, the engineer is an air traffic controller and has a visually demanding challenge. So in both games, the pilot has direct control over the vehicle but has no ground information about the map, and the engineer, who has that information, has no actual control. This implies that players have to constantly collaborate and communicate to succeed. To evaluate our approach, we conducted a totally remote study with mixed visual ability pairs. Our goal was to understand how the approach would impact players' perceptions, focusing on perceptions of engagement, competence, and autonomy. We recruited 26 participants in 13 pairs. Each pair had to be familiar with each other, so friends or family, and had to play both games together. After playing the games, they shared their thoughts through online surveys. We found that games stood out in relation to other games that participants already played in mixed visual ability contexts, and provided an exciting experience for those who had never played in such contexts. For example, one participant explained, "I haven't been able to find any games that are fun for my brother and I to play together. I feel like it's a great concept, and it was a lot of fun being able to play with my brother." Importantly, the games were successful in creating a playful intersection space to have fun, irrespective of abilities. On the words of a sighted participant, "On the other side, there was just another player with whom I was having fun, and there was no perception that he was a person with a disability." The balanced collaboration was also highlighted. A blind participant says, "I didn't feel any less important or with a secondary role because I was a person with visual impairments. On the contrary, I found my role to be important and necessary to the game." The approach showed value in breaking stigmas and raising awareness of the capabilities and gaming habits of people with visual impairments. However, some participants showed concerns regarding the inaccessibility of one of the roles, specifically to the fact that two visually impaired people could not play the game together. One participant mentioned that designing for mixed ability gaming is inherently discriminatory. This is a great point. We acknowledge that having roles inaccessible by design can be controversial, but despite being controversial, the study showed the potential for novel approaches in gaming where equity does not necessarily come from equality. Thank you.